Hi folks, if you're like me, you never have enough shop space. Now I started out decades ago with an 8x8 shed packed full of my tools, and every time I wanted to work on something I had to pull it out into the lawn and work on the project in the grass. Finally, after many years, I've been blessed to be able to build a 24x26 shop, which should be plenty of room for anybody. And I have no right to complain. I know a lot of you have some really cool layouts in single car garages, and some of you might be in that 8x8 shed. But what I have found is with all this space, I didn't start using it right away and it quickly filled up with junk. And so I need to work on that. But in the meantime, the answer is for me to make my tools mobile so I can move things around, figure out the optimal workflow, and be able to get to my tools as I need them in the space that I do have available to me in here. So most of my equipment is mobile. I do have two holdouts though. I have this small bandsaw and I have this press. But we're going to fix that today. I have two Central Machinery Harbor Freight mobile bases that we're going to put this equipment on. So we're going to assemble this, get it mounted on there, and see how it works. At least until I can get rid of some of the junk in here. So stick around and let's learn together. Before we put these mobile bases together, we need to know what the dimensions are of the drill press and the bandsaw. So I'm going to get those right now. If you saw my earlier video about this jet bandsaw back here, you'll know that I had a Bora base for it. It went together fairly well. It was a little more expensive than this Central Machinery version of it. They look very similar though. I did get the Central Machinery on a bit of a sale, which helped out a lot. And of course you can keep your eyes open for coupons and sales. All right, let's unbox this thing. And you might notice this isn't my normal work surface for my bench top. This is actually a 4x8 sheet of maple plywood that's not in very good condition. It would normally run about $90 per sheet. And the people at the big box store gave me 50% off if I could use it. I'm gonna put a light sand on it and I'm gonna paint the project I'm gonna work on with it. So that was fine for me. So I saved 40-something dollars. Didn't mind that at all. By the way, that project's going to be really special when I get to work on it, so keep a lookout for that. It has to do with a picnic table and plywood, so it'll be interesting. So let's see what we have here. Looks like I've got my rails, and you'll notice these nest inside each other, and that's how they'll be attached to adjust your length. We'll get those out of the way here for just a moment. These will be our corner pieces.
When I have a lot of parts like this, I typically like to lay everything out and kind of divide it into groups of like parts. And then of course that also includes the nuts and bolts. That way I can see everything that I'm working with there.
From what I can tell, I ended up with 10 different types of nuts and bolts and washers to work with on this. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick look at the instructions. So far, this is feeling very similar to the Bora, so I think they'll probably go together about the same. I'll be right back. Well, perhaps surprisingly, the instructions for this are fairly clear, at least the first part of them. We're going to start with the front wheel assemblies. And in these instructions, they're a nice clear image to work with. It doesn't look like it's been photocopied 80 times like you might have seen in some other things. And everything seems to be clearly labeled. Of course, there's a detailed breakdown further back you can refer to. But just based on the image, you can pretty much tell all the pieces you're working with. You are going to need some tools to assemble this. I found that I needed a 10, 11, 12, 14, and a 19 socket head. I also have a wrench that is a number 10 that I'll use on some of these where I have a nut and a bolt to deal with. In addition, I needed two Allen wrenches. I needed a number 5 and a number 6. Now this first phase is the front wheel assembly, and I've laid everything out and all the pieces we're going to need together, and we're going to go through step by step and assemble that. First, we take the plate and we put the wheel through the plate. Use the lock washer and then the nut. Now for this particular part, we're going to need a number 19 socket. I'm just going to tighten that down. You don't really need to hold the other end, you just need to hold it by the plate and that'll allow you to snug it up. And while I do this, I'm going to go ahead and do both sides and keep everything in step, so I'm just going to repeat the process. Now this next part is the wheelhouse assembly bracket, and you'll see it's got the nice labeling, Central Machinery, 500-pound limit, and then it even has a serial number for this particular device. What we're going to do is use the bottom hole. We're going to line this up, put the bolt through there, get it to come out the other side, and then we have a washer and a nut. Now this nut is going to use a number 12 socket. I also have a number 6 Allen wrench, so you can hold the other end. Now one of the keys here is you do not want to tighten this down too much. You're not trying to bend the metal together, you're just trying to get it nice and snug, flatten that lock washer out a little bit and call it good. You don't want to impede the operation of this thing. And again, we'll repeat the process on this side. Now I actually have these two bolts facing the same direction. I don't know that it really matters, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bolt out and swap it around so that the head of the bolt is protruding in opposite directions. Again, may not matter, but it makes me feel better. The next step is to assemble the foot pedal. This is what you're going to use to reach down with your foot and raise or lower this piece of equipment. This goes together very similar to the plate, except we have some rubber washers, so we need to make sure we put those in there and get those aligned correctly. And then we'll apply the split washer and the nut. Once again, not tightening too tight, just nice and snug. And I'm going to repeat the process on the other side and of course turn the bolt in the opposite direction. Next, we're going to assemble the rear wheel assembly. If I didn't mention it, the front wheel assembly for the smaller bolt used a number 12. This rear wheel assembly is going to use a number 11. We also have this small bolt that we're going to use, and the Allen wrench we stepped down from a 6 to a number 5. On this, they do have the bolt feeding from the outside in the image. Now the instructions mentioned putting a nut on the end of this, but it didn't specify which one other than having a number associated with it. I thought it was probably the nylon nut, but I wasn't 100% sure, so I went back to the parts list in the back of the book and verified it did spell it out there that it is the one with the nylon in it. And just like the front, we want to make it snug, but we don't want to bend metal. Now we're going to put the wheel assembly onto the front bracket. In looking at it, I believe I would like the extended bolt head facing toward the inside. So I'm going to swap these around real quick. I just prefer to have the extended bolt facing the inside. I think that will be a little bit better looking, and Shopcat just told me that it also means that the bolt wouldn't be hanging out the side, a chance for him to maybe get caught on it or something. So we'll do that. Hey buddy, Shopcat gave us seal of approval so we can press on. So we're going to go ahead and attach this to the outer edge using a bolt and then of course a nut. There are no washers here. And all this is being done with a number 10 socket and a number 10 wrench. I had to use a lot more persuasion than I expected to on that. I was really careful about not bending this metal, or at least I thought I was, but it took a little bit of effort. Looks like this other one's going to be the same way. I know I am having too much trouble, kiddo. I know. I know, I should have left those looser to begin with. I thought I did. Sorry. He's disappointed in me. That was a little more difficult than it should have been. If I had not tightened these so tight, I probably would have been okay. I'm surprised though, I thought I was pretty careful with that. The next step is to put the leveling feet on. Now we will have to adjust these as we go once we get the load on there. And even in the future, if I move the thing around the shop and the concrete may not be perfectly level, you may have to make some fine adjustments. There will be a nut on top to help lock it in place. We'll leave that loose for now. We've got the major pieces together. Now we just have to tie everything together with these cross pieces. These are designed so that they'll fit inside each other and slide so that you can adjust the width of the stand to whatever length's needed. Now this stand in this direction is only going to be 16.5 inches and I don't need both these, so I'm just going to use one. Now there are some things to consider when you're trying to figure out how wide this needs to be. Of course you have the length that you need for the equipment, but you also want to consider a couple other factors. You have, for example, these bolts that are protruding here. You have a bolt that's protruding here. So you may have to leave yourself a little extra room. You're not going to want to make this really snug so that the equipment barely fits in there, but you also don't want to make it too big to where it won't rest in there and give it good support. So I would say about 3/4 to 1 inch in excess of what you really need should take care of any of this. The other thing you have to consider is this rail has a lip on it. So just like this bolt here, that's going to take up some distance here, and you have to factor all that in. But again, 3/4 to about 1 inch should take care of that. The other thing to consider is, I'm not really crazy about the way this was designed in that I need a shorter piece, and it would be nice to put this particular bracket further back. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and use these two holes here because I know at a minimum I have to use those two. He wants me to tighten these really well. Yeah, we're going to tighten them, buddy. And these will be a number 10. We're going to tighten these, buddy. I promise. No, I'm not using a torque wrench. We don't have to be that precise, okay? We don't have to be that precise. He's telling me to use a torque wrench. You don't really need that. Okay, again, I need 16.5 inches. Now we can start dialing this in to make sure we get the right length. I'm going to account for that bolt there. And of course you have to line these holes up, so you're going to have about 1 inch increments to work with here. Okay, putting it all the way to the end's a little too tight, so I'm going to back off. And that's just a hair over 17. And if I factor in the bolt, that should be just fine. That should just fit in there. And I chose to put these bolts spaced out a little bit instead of right next to each other, just to distribute the holding power of it. Now the other side's going to be a mirror of this, so I'm just going to set this to the side, bring these pieces in, and repeat the process.
And of course, it's okay to go ahead and tighten these bolts down once you get the bar lined up to the wheel assembly.
And now that we have these two sides, it should be a pretty easy matter to figure out the distance we need this way. And for me, I need 19.5 inches. Again, you'll want to make sure you consider that you have this ridge from the support to factor in. I'm somewhat limited here. If you look, these bolts are already in place in these nuts, so they're kind of out of play unless I get a longer bolt. So I'm forced to use these 3 here and these 3 here. So I need to find the right size support that will get me what I need, but not be too long. So if I go there, that is like the outer limit of what I can do as far as how close I can come in. So if I go right here and put it on these last two and then these last two, we'll see what that gets us. Unfortunately, it's just a little off. It's really not going to work very well. Let me see. Let me check on these longer ones. These might actually be too long. That's actually too long. So I've got a bit of a problem. I've tried swapping things around to get this the exact dimensions I need it, and I'm having troubles dialing that in. The box does say that the minimum square base is 12 1/4 by 12 1/4, and the minimum rectangle base is 18 3/8 by 12 1/4. I would have thought I could have easily gotten this out of that, but the available pieces to me and my options of laying it out don't let me dial it in exactly the rectangle shape that I want. So I think the quickest option, well, the quickest option might be just to cut this piece off. But in lieu of that, I think I'm going to try to find a longer bolt, and then I'm going to undo these wheels, at least one of the bolts on here, and then I'll be able to put this piece across and get it closer to where I want it. So I'm going to go look for that real quick. He said I told you it wasn't going to work. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this longer piece of support, and I'm going to remove the nut and bolt for the wheel support, and we're going to actually get a longer bolt like this that will go all the way through and then hold this piece of metal securely, in addition to the other normal bolts I would put in here. And I'm able to do that because I'm a hoarder, and every once in a while, if these things go on sale, I'll go buy these variety packs of nuts and bolts and even screws, sometimes stainless steel, just so that I have them on hand when I really need them. Just verifying I had to remove it on the other side also, and in my particular case I do. I'm glad I didn't use a torque wrench now. Now we can dial this in. Just because this bolt does protrude a little more than the original bolt out the side, I'm going to put the bolt in this direction. And the area where it protrudes is covered and you'll never see it, so I think that'll be the better option. I'm also going to go ahead and put a lock washer on here and the nut. And before I tighten that down, I'll go ahead and put these others in, the original ones. Now we can flip around and make this adjustment. That's 20 inches to the inside of these seams, so about a ½ inch more than we need, which of course is slightly better than having a ½ inch less than we need. But this should work now. I'm going to repeat this process by putting this bolt in. I wasn't paying attention on this side, and I put the bolt head on the inside. It really won't matter, but I'll flip it back around just because I'll know it's there. Now the good news is this side will be easier because there's no wheels or anything to contend with, and we already know what our distance is.
Once again, we attach the bolts and tighten those down nice and tight.
Well, that completes assembly of the first unit. Now I have to do the other one. I'll do that off camera. I'll let you know if I have any problems with it as I go along. This one was a little bit unique in that I couldn't quite get the right size railings to fit exactly what I needed. It was a quick fix, basically just getting a longer bolt so that it would go through the two pieces of metal and the wheel assembly, and that fixed the issue. It would have been nice if maybe there were a couple longer pieces to start with and I wouldn't have to go find a bolt, but not a big deal because I had bolts laying around. I'm going to go do the second one now, and I'll only come back with that one if I have any issues so I can point them out to you. Otherwise, when we come back, we're going to put the equipment on these and give them a test run. Once I get Shop Cat to wake up and move. I'll go find something else to do. I'll be right back. Well, Shop Cat never did move, so I got a lot of work done around the shop and got the second base together. Had to use a different part of the work table though. But it looks like it'll work. I'm pretty happy with it. It went faster the second time, of course, like anything else. Once you kind of know what you're doing, it goes a little bit faster. I was not able to shrink it down as small as it needed to be in this direction, but I think it's okay. That drill press always seemed a little top heavy anyway, so having that little bit of extra width is probably a good thing. And because of that, I may actually put a piece of plywood in here and bolt it down if it doesn't feel like it rides right. But we're gonna go give that a try now and see how it works. You just stay right there. You're okay. We're ready to try to get this drill press on this stand. Some time ago, I made a video about installing a hoist in my shop. And some may say, why would you need a hoist in a wood shop? Well, it's come in really handy. You might want to check out that video. When I need to lift big things like this, it's helped my back a lot.
I'm going to go ahead and hook up these straps so I can get this thing lifted and get it onto that mobile base. I hope you're enjoying this content, and I hope to keep producing quite a bit more. I do appreciate any likes and subscribes that you might be willing to do. That helps me out a lot. Just keeps me motivated here to keep going and creating some more content that I hope you enjoy and can get something out of. I appreciate it. Now let's finish up with this drill press and then we'll get on to the next step.
And now we're mobile.
Now with the equipment on there, we can adjust those leveling feet. And it's important to make sure they work both with the wheel down and up. And again, you may have to adjust if your floor is uneven.
And now that we have that, we can roll the equipment around. These still can be top heavy, so be careful. Try to pick some place that's at a low center of gravity when you push it around the shop. And again, you may have to adjust these feet as you go, depending on how level your flooring is.
Now we'll wait for the old guy to just kind of shuffle out of there and push that drill press out of the way. And we'll move on to the next piece of equipment. Come on, sir, move along. I know you can go a little faster than that. Yeah, that's better. Get that thing over there.
Whew, I wish I had wheels on this thing. I will in a minute. I would give you a word of warning though on this. Try to figure out where your center of gravity on the equipment is. I'm not really 100% sure on this, so we're going to see how it goes, and we're going to take our time and be really careful with it. I would also mention that on that drill press, I noticed that the head of it is on there with a large set screw. Now I lifted it by the head. There is a chance I could have let loose with the weight on the bottom. I probably should have raised the table of it up and gotten the band all the way around that part too to support the weight. It did fine, but it was a little bit of a risk doing it that way. So just be careful in how you lift your equipment on something like this. You don't want it letting loose or falling over on you. Okay, this one does rock a little bit, but it has its own independent feet that I can use to adjust. Well, those feet don't adjust very well, so I'm going to use a shim for now. And now we're mobile. Oh, hey. Well, that was a quick and easy project. Had a little extra time left over, and Shop Cat decided I could do a little grooming with that extra time. So he deserves it. Anyway, it was a pretty nice project to work on. It was fairly easy, especially if you have multiple to do. Once you do one, the next one will go together probably in about 15-20 minutes. Pretty easy once you get your measurements. I will say a few lessons learned. I'm going to add a 3/4 inch piece of plywood to the base of these. You don't have to. There's plenty of room on the edges where the feet of the equipment actually ride. But I want to give it a little extra rigidity, and I'm going to actually bolt it to it. Now there are holes in the piece of metal of the base that I will use to bolt the wood to, and then I'll bolt the equipment to the wood. I think that will just help make sure it's stabilized a little bit better, especially with that drill press. That's a little top heavy, and it just worries me a little bit. I do like the fact of having the mobile base in that it's a wider base than the original footprint of the base that was on the drill press, so it should make it a little bit more stable overall. Anyway, we appreciate having you around. I hope you enjoyed it, and come back and we'll do more videos in the future. Thanks for watching. Yeah, I'm sorry I stopped. I had to go talk to them.